Good evening, Bulldogs and families. I am Mrs. Fox, and this evening I am reading The Poppy Lady. It is actually a picture book biography about Moina Bell Michael and what she did to make a tribute to the veterans. So I hope you enjoy this story. I hope you learn a little bit. I will be leaving off just before the epilogue. So if you decide at the end of the story that you want to learn more about Moina Bell and the great things that she did to serve others, please go to the local library to check it out. Thanks.
The Poppy Lady, Moina Bell Michael and Her Tribute to Veterans, by Barbara Elizabeth Walsh, and the paintings are by Lane Johnson. Moina Bell Michael looked forward to summer vacation when she returned home from her third year of boarding school in 1885. All appeared normal on the family plantation. Her 2 brothers were off fishing in Indian Creek, and her 4 sisters were busy helping her mother prepare for the big 4th of July barbecue. But Moina soon found that things were far from normal in this close-knit community of Good Hope, Georgia. In these 20 years since the surrender, families who had lost everything in the Civil War were still unable to recover their losses and start over. And while Moina had been away, things had gotten worse. Drought had ruined the cotton crops, so people had little money. The children in the community couldn't even attend school. There was no money for a teacher. Moina's mother came up with a plan. From an early age, Moina was determined to learn. She had read the complete works of Shakespeare and Byron. Now, at age 15, she was well educated. Perhaps she could teach the neighbors' children. The thought interested Moina. At her mother's suggestion, she cleaned out the slaves' log cabin abandoned on the plantation and set up a school with 2 of her sisters, 1 brother, and a few local children. On that first day, Moina began class with a verse from the Bible and an inspiring song and a prayer. Moina believed anything was possible if you did your best and followed through. Throughout her life, she often relied on her favorite motto, "Whatsoever your hands find to do, do it with all your might." In March 1917, German U-boats had sunk another American ship, and the nation was outraged. Would the president call for war? Would Congress agree? Moina Bell Michael prayed not. She had been touring Europe when war first broke out in the summer of 1914. But now bomb craters, trenches, barbed wire barriers, and battlefields covered the beautiful countryside, visions that still made her shudder. In April 1917, the paperboy wheeled his bicycle across the University of Georgia's normal school, slamming on his brakes when he reached Moina. Moina snatched the Athens banner away from him, struck by the thundering headline, "Wilson asking for war." Moina slowly climbed to the top of the dormitory steps and held out the newspaper for all to see. It was striking how different personalities reacted to the sight of that headline, as war began hammering against the home door of every American. Moina knew what war would mean to girls, the college girls. She was their teacher and foster mother. Their brothers, their sweethearts, were of war service age. Some of their fathers were. Moina promised she would let them know as soon as the President and Congress reached a decision. At night, Moina called the Athens banner. Each time she was told to be patient. The President was still talking to Congress. At 10:30 p.m., she called again. "Tell the young ladies to say their prayers, to go to bed, and to sleep," the frustrated editor replied. When news broke, an extra edition would be delivered to campus and into Moina's hands. Sleep was out of the question. On campus, Moina looked to the stars and moon, bright on this clear springtime night, and breathed the scent of the white Cape jasmine blossoms. She thought of the boys at the university. She offered all to God if only He would spare them. She thought of the boys throughout the country, if only she could go in their place. Before dawn, the edition arrived. Moina read Wilson's inspiring plea to defend democracy, defend the rights of small nations, defend the freedoms of the seas. America was going to war. Moina vowed to do everything she could for the soldiers, to remember them. Moina knitted socks and sweaters, rolled bandages for the Red Cross, and when enlisted friends and students came to say goodbye, she gave them a little remembrance to take overseas, but Moina wanted to do more. She delivered books, magazines, and candy to their campus nearby. She and friends invited soldiers home for dinner. And I felt privileged to give my best welcome to these lads in my country's uniform. And when it was time for them to leave, Moina went to the train station to see them off. And my heart was thrilled with pride for their bravery, courage, and cheerfulness. They were so young, they were so innocent of the dangers they were to face. But Moina needed to do even more. To become a canteen worker for the YMCA and to help soldiers overseas seemed perfect. She could listen about home and family and serve food to men on leave from the battlefronts. In the fall of 1918, her appointment was approved. 49-year-old Moina headed for New York City and the training programs at the Y headquarters at Columbia University. She successfully completed the course, but was told she was too old to go overseas. Moina refused to give up. But what could she do now? Help the soldiers before they left for war. Of course, Moina set up a desk in the basement of Columbia's Hamilton Hall, where soldiers, sailors, Marines, and secretaries came during their free time. Every day brought privileges to serve men and women going overseas, each to face the submarine-infested Atlantic and the gas, bombs, and shrapnel of the battlefronts. But as winter approached, the large room turned gray and gloomy. The soldiers deserved a brighter, more comfortable place. Moina knew what to do. With her small salary, Moina bought fresh flowers and placed them throughout the room. More soldiers came to read and write. Others came to spend time with family, friends, and sweethearts. So often they would hang about near the desk, waiting for a bit of attention, and Moina was happy to look at photographs, listen to letters, and share the latest hometown news. But she needed to do even more. One Saturday morning, a soldier left a magazine at her desk. Moina turned to a marked page to find "We Shall Not Sleep" by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, a Canadian physician. She had read the poem many times, but she read it again. Touched by McCrae's tribute to his soldiers, he could not save on the battlefields of Flanders. The poem was most strikingly illustrated in color. Spirits of soldiers floated above a battleground covered in white crosses and bright red poppies. There were no names on the crosses, no memory of who rested beneath the red poppies, and Moina knew what she had to do. She read the last verse slowly. "Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep though poppies grow in Flanders fields." To Moina it seemed as though the silent voices again were vocal, whispering. She thought of a friend and students and the soldiers at the Y, and she knew she could never forget them. Moina turned over an envelope and wrote a pledge ending with a promise. "And now the torched poppy red we wear in honor of our dead. Fear not that ye have died for naught. We'll teach the lesson that ye wrought in Flanders fields." When she finished, Moina looked up at 3 war workers standing by her desk. On behalf of everyone, they had come to repay her for kindness. She shared both poems with the men. Impressed, they shared them with others. Soon Moina was surrounded by men wanting poppies of their own to honor their buddies, sleeping now among the poppies of Flanders fields. Moyna knew just what to do. With their $10 check, she announced, "I shall buy red poppies. I shall always wear red poppies. Poppies of Flanders fields." Moyna went poppy hunting. On the streets of New York, it never occurred to me that the difficulty I would have in finding artificial poppies of Flanders fields in the novelty shops of New York City, said Moyna. At last, in Wanamaker's department store, she found 1 large and 24 small red silk poppies. Moyna pinned one on her cloak collar and hurried back to the Y. It was evening and the room was quiet. Moyna placed the large red poppy in a vase on her desk and handed out 23 smaller ones to the men and women leaving soon for France. She watched as they pinned them on their uniforms. Still, Moyna needed to do even more. She would not stop until every American wore a poppy to remember the soldiers. Always. Two days after Moyna bought the 25 poppies, World War I ended. Parades and celebrations welcomed veterans home. Moyna was joyously elated. I had seen them go away by the thousands. They were coming back by the thousands. But eventually Americans wanted to forget the horrors of war and get on with their lives. It wasn't that simple for veterans. Trying to reclaim their jobs, they found that women who had filled their positions weren't willing to step aside, and bosses forgot promises to hire the men back. This upset Moyna especially as she taught classes for disabled servicemen at the University of Georgia. Some were wounded or suffered the lingering effects of poison gas. Unable to work, they couldn't support themselves or their families. Once again, Moyna realized she must do something. What if the poppy could be more than a tribute to soldiers who didn't return? What if it could benefit servicemen and women and their families in need? Moyna spent every spare moment and all the money she could save urging groups to adopt the Flanders Fields Memorial Poppy to honor and support the veterans. Finally, her persistence paid off. Several national and international veterans organizations adopted the poppy as their memorial flower, and the message traveled overseas. People donated their hard-earned nickels, pennies, and dimes in exchange for a poppy. Millions of dollars were raised for veterans, war widows, and orphans, and Moyna affectionately referred to the small red blossom as a miracle flower. To learn more about Moyna, please go see your local library. Thank you for listening, and good night.